research is a process involving a lot of steps and stages. But the question that arises is, how do we conduct that research? Where do we come about to conducting research, coming about the topic, finding solutions to that, and the methodology part of it? The answer to that is identifying the research problem. Now, a research problem, as we've understood, is not a very big thing to identify and to come about. I am Akriti Taneja, a PhD scholar at SOJNMS, and with me I have Dr. K.S. Arul Sedman, who would be talking about identifying research problems. So, Arul sir, how do we identify and what do we understand by research problem in the first place?
Okay. So before answering your question, I'll give you a brief overview about the research and the different types of research. Then we will come back to the identifying a research problem because these are interconnected. That and then the earlier other units and the other lectures we have covered the basics of research process. Research is nothing but a kind of exploring a new ideas, or we are identifying an answer to a research problem, or we are finding an explanation for a scenario. And that we are doing in a systematic manner. Either we will collect the data from the field, or we will collect the required details from the literature. Whichever manner, we will try to give a new explanation to the existing scenario. This kind of research can be done in multiple ways. That also we have seen in the earlier presentations. If we are verifying existing data or proving existing theory in a new context, mostly we go for quantitative studies. Or we are very curious to know about new scenario and we want to understand a scenario from multiple perspectives, or critically analyzing a status quo, we might take a qualitative study. So quantitative or qualitative, both are through both the method we are trying to understand new scenario, we are giving a new explanation, or we are finding an answer to that. So research is a process through which we are finding a solution about an issue or about a problem. So in order to do a research, we need a topic or any issue or any problem. So that is the main concern of this presentation, and that is answers your question, Akriti. Because research process, it's quite familiar. Only thing is we need to be little more scientific and more rigorous in a systematic manner. If that two segment is being fulfilled, systematic and scientific, then automatically entire process can be completed in a very smooth manner. But the important part, the important segment of research process is identifying a research problem and taking it forward and measuring that research problem in a very systematic manner, collecting the supporting data and giving our own perspective, interpretation or solution. The starting point of any research is identifying a research problem. Then automatically once the research problem is identified, then the rest of the process it will be go smoothly and systematically. In a routine life, we used to come across many scenarios, and some of the scenarios might be problematic. Problematic means we'll encounter many issues in our personal life or professional life or in a common scenario, community, society, when we are interacting with them, or as a nation or a society, we are facing a lot of issues, a lot of problems. These are called social problems because we need to understand that in human society, whichever context, whether it's developed or developing countries, they are not progressing in a very utopian context. No, everything is not provided. Every way there are issues. There is a tension between many institutions, or there is a rivalry between groups sharing the resources. You look at the newspaper, look at the television channel, every day you will find a news item. Majority of the items talking about the tension between the many stakeholders. These are problematic area. So in the research part, we are not talking about a social problem. So social problem involves the society at large. It involves a broader framework, and it covers all the dimension of the society. Government is involved, private institutions are involved, social institutions are involved, individuals also involved in the process of finding a solution for social problem. The way in which we are finding a solution for social problem, for example, there is an inequality in distribution of resources in the society. That's there in a, whichever social context if you go, you will find that inequality part. Inequality in distribution of resources. Some people accumulates large amount of wealth, and large section of the society might deprive of resources. This is not a deliberate attempt, but there is a social problem. Like that, there is a problem of illiteracy, there is a problem of quality of education, quality of health services. If you take every dimension of our social life, we'll find a problem. But the problem of deprivation or inequality needs to be addressed. That can be addressed in the research, or but primarily that the many stakeholders who are involved in this process of managing or streamlining or developing a conventions or rules and regulation for the social institutions, they will try to address it those problems in a different manner. That may not be scientific, that may not be systematic, because they look at the real context, the practically they approach and doable manner, they'll find a problem. But whereas in our research context, social problems might be become a research problem. But here in the research context, we need to identify a issue or a topic or a problem that can be explored in a very systematic and scientific manner, usually in a very limited context. The reason for limited context is majority of the research in academic field are managed by individuals or small team manages that. May not have much resources to execute a massive study across the country, across the global context. May not be possible. Primarily in academic field, and the research is most of individualistic nature. Whereas in the industry-based research, where the sponsorship comes, and the sponsorship also are limited. No agency pumps millions and billions of money for finding a solution for a small issue. They may be interested to sponsor a research with certain agenda, because what is the return they are getting after investing huge money on that. So the perspective of academic research, perspective of industry research differs in many ways, though they may follow the same procedure, same approach, same data collection, analysis, everything they'll do that. But industry research oriented towards the outcome that fulfills or that justifies the investment made in that research process. Academic field is whereas different. Here, genuinely efforts are being made to understand the research. Through research, they'll identify the problem or they identify the solution for the problem. So mostly it's in limited context because of lack of resources. And entire social issue cannot be studied in one or two research projects. Okay, so you need to understand the social problem is a larger context and research problem is a limited context. Social problem can be addressed by the relevant agencies or bodies or government authorities or court system, legal framework. There are many players in addressing this social problem because this is the day-to-day life. Some of the issue might require immediate attention. Some might require a short-term approach or long-term approach. So there are various ways in which this social institutional, the tension between various social institutions are addressed. Research is not like that. Can't be taken a research project for next 20, 30 years. There are projects happening, and but particularly in the social science, in academic field, there are limited scope, but a large number of studies are short term aims for with a limited time frame, maybe with 6 months or 2 years or 3 years or maybe 5 years. Mostly because academic research are linked with awarding degrees, one level. The large number of research projects happen in academic field linked with the research degree, because that has a limited time duration. Or funded projects. Funded project means projects are funded by either government agencies or corporate field or multinational agencies, that also comes with a time frame. So here, the social problem is addressed by multiple stakeholders without very specific time limit, but time frame is being subject to the nature of the issue. Whereas in the research problem, confined to very strict time frame, usually some months or sometime in years. So that's you need to understand the difference between a social problem and a research problem. In a simplistic manner, a research problem is a statement about an area of concern or condition to be improved, a difficulty to be eliminated, or a troubling question that exists in a scholarly literature, in theory, or in practice, that points to the need for meaningful understanding and deliberate investigation. If you go through the literature, or if you encounter your routine life, or through a kind of proper dialogue, if you find a scenario that needs meaningful understanding and that needs a deliberate investigation, if that's the case, then that issue more suitable for academic research, that might qualify as a research problem. And this is a overall understanding of a research problem and differences between social problem and a research problem. We have understood that, and from where we can generate, or from where we can identify a research problem. There are few indications, there are few sources in which we can identify a research problem. One is a everyday life research problem, often discovered in a normal routine life. Every communication, every information exchange, every knowledge generation is linked with the information delivery, information exchanges. And you might have studied about different communication settings, face to face issue, or face to face communication, or group communication, or in mass communication, or like an online field where the communication happens across the country, across the culture. Sometime we can contextualize saying that there are Anganwadi workers, community health workers. They are visiting various villages, and their main duty is to carry the information from the various sources, particularly from government agencies, to the needy people. The assumption is the village segment may not have adequate access to plenty of resources due to lack of resources, lack of economic purchasing power to buy newspaper, or afford to have computer with 24/7 net connections, or they may have lack of education, or lack of adequate language fluency to access relevant information. So there is a lacuna of information about health requirements in the rural segment. For that, there are some segment, there are health workers, community health workers, Anganwadi workers, Asha workers. There are very various projects are happening. There are intermediate people, they'll carry the information from one segment of government agencies and to the rural segment. Mostly happens through face to face settings. They'll visit the rural segment, and they'll carry the information, they'll convey, and they'll do it in multiple manner. So there is a face to face communication, that we understood that. And here the scenario is through face to face communication, one group of people conveying health information to other group. We can identify whether this scenario works in the sense, then automatically all the rural segments should have adequate information. Prevention is better than treatment, cure. So in that manner, if they have adequate knowledge about health, so they can prevent many diseases. Is it happening or not? We know there are a lot of issues in the rural segment, and Anganwadi workers or Asha workers, they're taking a lot of efforts to conveying the messages. There are some inadequacies. If this face-to-face settings of players between Anganwadi workers, community health workers, and rural women, if that happens regularly, then automatically they must be having more knowledge. If more knowledge means, one of the indicators is that we can reduce the infant fertility or infant mortality rate. But our indication is that the numbers are very high. So there's something wrong in that process of conveying information. So communication is happening, but messages are delivered, messages are received, but the message is not converted into knowledge because not able to practice it in appropriate manner. So that can be studied. So this is the one scenario, this is the one issue. What went wrong? What is the problem in existing in this communication between health workers and rural women? Is it happening or not? If it's happening, why it's not being translated into knowledge system? So this is a research problem. This comes from the normal routine life we encounter. If we explore the environment in and around our system. Another source of identifying research problem is paucity of data. Sometime if you encounter the scenario in which you are not able to identify in detail, informations are available. Information, for example, there is a issue about mobile penetration and internet penetration. Huge amount of mobile penetration and substantial amount of internet penetration, but the gap is huge. 60 to 65% as of 2021-22, 65% of internet penetration in India, 93% of mobile penetration. And why there is a gap? If you go to the online, if you search that, if you'll find plenty of information about digital inequality, digital divide, everything talking about European context or American context. There are literature available in Indian context, but that's not sufficiently answering your question. Why there is a gap between 93% of mobile penetration and 65% of internet penetration? Because mobile with a smartphone, 24/7 data connection, you have internet connection. But the penetration in the government data shows the different numbers, and we are not able to understand why this gap, 30% of gap between these two segments. And the information available from the developed countries. We are not able to understand clearly about Indian context. If this is a scenario, if you find that there is a scenario, there is an issue, and we are not able to identify more details. If that case, you can do a research. That's become a very classic example to undertake a research problem. The third option is existing literature. Go through various research articles, either about digital inequality or about health communication, health journalism, the two examples we have seen earlier. If you go through last 5 years and 10 years of review of literature, if you review the literature, you will find that some trend is happening, some sort of methodology is being used, and this is an understanding of current scenario. Digital inequality is being studied from this perspective, and this is the understanding. Our health journalism or health communication is being studied from this various perspective. If you go through literature, you will find that there is a gap is existing in the literature. If you carefully study that, we have separate presentation on review of literature. You will understand exactly how to do a literature, how to identify a research gap. So this is one of the sources of identifying a research problem. One is the everyday life, paucity of data, and review of literature. Then another option, the fourth option, that's many people used to prefer to take it forward. If you go through any research article, research reports, or research documents, many of them, majority of them, ends their report with further recommendations, recommending that this is research happened this manner, and there are areas which is not fulfilled by this exercise that can be taken it forward. The reports might suggest, recommend couple of ideas. Okay, this digital inequality among rural women versus rural urban women needs to be studied from the educational point of view or skill point of view. So they might have studied in a resources point of view, they might recommend different scenario. Like that, every majority of the research reports ends with the recommendations, and that gives ample scope for students or scholars from the academic field to take it forward on a specific interesting area. So now we'll understand the steps involved, steps to identify a research problem. Now you understand that either health communication or digital inequality or children and media literacy capacity or skills. This is an area we have identified, and the theme is being identified, and go through the literature and identify the sub areas, sub themes. And once you identify the sub themes, then automatically you need to identify the research topic. from the area, from the theme, you're narrowing down to topic. Here, this example of children media literacy, and that's the area theme. And after further scrutiny of literature, the theme is being converted to topic, where the child rights, the children, and digital media. Digital media is open to everyone, including children. Majority of the content available in the online field is not meant for children, whereas in Indian population there are 42% of the population belongs to age group of less than 18. So here they have access open to digital media, and also they have rights. They have fundamental rights, and through their rights, how they are negotiating their relationship with the digital media. The children, digital medium, and their guaranteed rights. How they are negotiating with the medium for communication point of view. See the area we have identified children and media literacy. From the media literacy children perspective, we identify the topic children and child rights and media literacy. This is a topic we have identified that. Then once this topic is identified, we need to know what are the existing literature, what happened in this area, what kind of research happened so far, and what kind of literature are recommending, and what are the future course of action can be taken forward. So then we have to go back to the literature, existing literature, either through library research or through online research, identify the relevant topic based related to child rights and digital media and media literacy capacity. Because if the children become more successful to utilize the digital medium, provided if they have relevant capacity, competencies, skills to negotiate with the medium. So skill is required, and they need to know the child rights, their own rights. Then only they can get a more benefit from the medium. So that you will find more dimension through proper research. So once you go through the various literature about child rights, competency, and online field and the children segment, then you will identify the narrow gap. There is a gap existing between the competency level and children's utilization of digital medium for learning purposes. So remember that the area we started with the media literacy and children, then rights, then we went through literature, then we identified the gap. That gap requires further scrutiny, further investigation, meaningful investigation. So that is a research problem. Area, topic, from literature, we have identified the research problem. This is how the process starts. You might identify a research problem from either day-to-day life or through the literature or from recommendations, but you have to generalize basically initially. From generalization to the narrow down to the specific topic, then with the help of literature you'll identify a research problem. What kind of data needs to be collected from the literature? Primarily in the academic field, industry is more confined to very specific area, local market, specific brand, particular company, and they have some issues. Newspaper circulation is going down consistently for the last 6 months. So the newspaper might be interested to understand why a newspaper is facing a crisis in the circulation thing. So this is kind of a scenario. Then automatically they might assign an agency, internally or external agency, to investigate why the market is not responding to their quality of newspaper content. So there may not be much effort required to what happened in Brazil or what happened in South Africa or what happened in America, where the circulation figures are going drastically in different scenario. They may not require to go through that case studies, but specifically they're interested because newspaper wants the answer for that. Last 6 months, why the newspaper facing a crisis in circulation? They need an answer, and they have to pinpoint, the agency need to pinpoint, is it due to competition or due to arrival of other brand or competition from other medium, or there's something wrong with their content, or they might have editorial policy might have in fact impacted the audience. So they need to know that. Here the earlier literature review may not help much because they want a solution, immediate solution that address the business issue. Whereas in the academic field, newspaper circulation and the readership relationship, we want to do that, then we need to carefully study what kind of research happened, finding the relationship between newspaper content and the circulation figure and readership relationship. So then we have to go back to the Brazil or South Africa or American context, where scholars might have studied about various perspectives about the research on the relationship between circulation and content and social scenario. You can understand the difference between industrial research and research, academic research, where the literature plays a very crucial role to strengthen your understanding, pinpointing your research problem, and fine tuning your research problem. And another important point is whether this research is relevant or can be achieved within the time span, or is it significant to undertake that research in a given point of time. Is it a topic needs to be focused, and in the research the clarity and focus are essential components of any process. Without focus, without clarity, we can't recommend any explanation, or we can't come with any solution or answer for any solution, answer for any scenario on that. The research needs to have clarity, then only we can investigate properly. And if we want to do a proper systematic investigation, and if we have to construct the proper variables, once the variables are identified, then only we can collect the data, either in the quantitative manner or the qualitative manner. Or is it significant enough to do the research now? If we study the impact of black and white newspaper and color television presentation, it's little meaningless, because it might be relevant in 30-40 years back. That point of time, newspaper mostly black and white, and there was a scenario of color television in that scenario. But now television and newspapers are interlinked, are mostly in the colorful manner they're presenting that. So it's kind of insignificant to study this kind of issues on that. So with that research, with the literature, you will identify the problem. Problem needs to be further divided into aims, objectives, and objectives are, with objectives and aims, we will develop a hypothesis. And the hypothesis will test it if it is a quantitative. If it is a qualitative study, we'll have a research questions. So identifying a research problem from topic to thematic area to research problem, and research problem converted to aims and objectives. Objectives further leads to either hypothesis or research questions. This is how the research starts in the beginning. Then we'll move on to the methodological design and data interpretation and report writing.
Right. So here we've understood about a research problem. How do we emerge that from a social problem? Then we've also understood the sources of a research problem, whether it's paucity of data, whether it's from a normal life, whether it's review of literature, or if those are suggested from the recommendations or suggestions. Next, we've also discussed about research problem and how we can identify it and the steps involved in it. After finding a research problem, we've also talked about how we come about from a research problem to research aim, research questions, and then deriving the hypothesis. That's about it for now. Thank you.